All right, so now we're ready to sew our button onto our fabric. So there are 3 different types of buttons you can have as far as the way you sew them on. So this is what we call a shank button. It's smooth on the top. You don't see any holes, but if you flip it over, there is a little shank right here. So your hole that you're going to sew through goes here, but there's this little piece of plastic here, or a little section called the shank, that holds the button up off of the fabric. Your other type of button is what we call an eye button. And so you see the holes in the button from the top, or the eyes. This is a 2-hole button. This is a 4-hole button. These buttons do not have the shank on the back side to hold them off the fabric. So as we sew these on, we have to create a shank out of thread, because the purpose for the shank is to hold the button up off the fabric so that when it is buttoned, it allows room for the second layer of fabric to sit underneath the button. So as to sew this on, first we're going to line up our button hole with our fabric. So this would be if you had the left and the right side of your fabric together. I've overlapped mine so that the buttonhole is in the center of the fabric. So there's equal amount on this side as there is on this side of the fabric. So I'm going to lay that down. Remember, the interfacing side is down. So we want right sides up when we're going to do this. To sew a button on, we're going to sew by hand. So you need to get a hand needle, and you need to thread the eye of the needle, okay? Once we do that, we're going to sew our buttons on with what we call a double thread. To make a double thread, we're going to bring the thread through the button, and we're going to bring both ends of the thread together, and we're going to tie a knot in that. So to do that, we can wrap it around our finger and then pull through, making a knot at the end and putting our 2 pieces of yarn or thread into one. So at the needle, our thread is folded in half. Okay, so to start our button, we're going to go with both layers together. We're going to go from the underside of the piece that our button is going to go through, and we're going to come up through our buttonhole where it's open. Okay, this way we ensure that the button is placed correctly in the fabric, and we want that needle to come up through the center of the buttonhole. Then we're going to place our button on there. Okay. And we're going to come up, and then we're going to go down through the eye and back through the buttonhole. Once we do that once, then we can take the piece that had the buttonhole off so that we just have our piece of fabric that our button is going to be sewn to. Okay. All right, now we're going to, so we went through one set of the eyes. Now we're going to come from the underneath, and we're going to come up through the other eye, and we're going to go back down so that we now have 2 rows of stitching that are going through the eyes, and they are parallel to each other. Because we have to create a shank, we're going to take a straight pin and put that underneath our threads that are there, so that we create a gap in our threads. Okay? Now, we're going to repeat that process of going up and down through the holes 2 more times so that we will have stitched it 3 times. So come up from the bottom, go across, come up through the other set of eyes, and back down. And we're going to do that one more time. Okay, so now we've stitched the button on, but now we need to create that shank. So we're going to come up from the bottom, but we're going to come through the fabric, but not through the button. Okay. Then we're going to take our thread and just wrap it around our button tightly 3 times. And then we're going to go back down through the fabric to the wrong side of the fabric. Okay. Now to tie it off, we're just going to go underneath our threads. We're going to create a loop. We're going to bring our needle through that loop and pull it tight. And we're going to do that one more time. Create a loop, bring our needle through that loop, and then we can cut those threads. We can pull the pin out, and now we should be able to put our button through our buttonhole, and it should line up.